If you're ready, Chuck, I'll do attendance.
Yes, please.
Okay. Chuck Merdler,
Yes.
Sylvia Alexander,
Yes.
Bob Bender,
Here.
Nick Fazio,
Here.
David Gelman,
Present.
Rosemary Ginty. I just admitted Rosemary. There she is, connecting to audio. Dan Paternak,
Present.
Julie Reyes, Marty Wolpoff.
Here.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Chuck. We're missing Julie Reyes. I'll take note if she joins.
Is she on? Do you know?
No, not yet.
All right. Very good. Now, we have one public official represented, the assembly member, Mr. Dinowitz. Anybody else here? I don't see any yet. Any other representatives of elected officials? Okay, then we can get going. I would like to change the order of things. I see Mr. Rodney has joined us, so we're in shape to do that. Let me tell you a little bit of background. When I first saw that Tishman Speyer was on the agenda, and we had been talking over the past few weeks among several of us about how we would get to answer some of the basic questions about affordable housing. Gary was largely responsible for thousands upon thousands of affordable housing units during his tenure as the president of the New York City Housing Development Corporation. And I was privileged to serve on his board. And it seemed to me that that was a good beginning for a program that we have tried to get started to put together to address affordable housing in all of its components, and to deal first with the issue of what is affordable housing, and how do you define affordable? What's affordable to the people of Riverdale is not affordable to the people in the South Bronx, nor indeed in other parts of our community district. What's affordable on Park Avenue is not necessarily affordable in Kingsbridge. So how do you measure that? How do you deal with it? With 421A gone, that's a problem for developers. How are they going to be able to finance the development of such housing? Those are some of the issues that are inherent in the question of affordable housing. It was only after I got to that point of talking to Gary about this that I realized the issue that he was coming here on. And I imposed upon him to talk to us first about the basic overpowering issues of affordable housing. Now, that's the wisest comment I've heard this evening. It seemed to me that it was still appropriate to put him first, get his expertise before we turn to the issues attendant to the visitation site, which is obviously the next issue on the agenda. Gary, let me start off by asking you a question. As you heard me comment a few moments ago, and as you've obviously commented from time to time, what's affordable in one part of the area is certainly not affordable in another. And where you use AMI that includes part of Westchester County's very affluent communities, how the heck can you say that the people in the South Bronx ought to be governed by that kind of a measurement? So could you start out by telling us, how do you as a developer working with one of the leading and best reputed construction companies and development companies, Tishman Speyer, how do you measure affordable housing and do that both in your former capacity and your current, if you don't mind?
Sure. And well, first, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for taking the time to speak with me this evening. So look, to answer your question, Chuck, I would say for me, affordable housing is housing that allows a household, whether that's an individual or a family, to pay for their living accommodations while having enough funds to cover other basic living essentials. Now, that could be a number of different things depending on your household. That could just be something as very simple as buying groceries, paying your utility bills, or paying for transportation, whether you take the subway or if you have to drive. You know, that's like, in a nutshell, that's what it is. You touched on something with regard to AMI. And to the extent everybody knows any of this, please jump in and I'm happy to stop. But for those who aren't familiar, AMI stands for Area Median Income. That's a standard that is set by the federal government once a year for the entire country. And then depending on where you live, that fluctuates. So in New York City, as Chuck touched on, or as the chairman touched on, excuse me, you have Westchester County included in our AMI calculation. You also have Nassau and Suffolk County included in that calculation as well. Now, it's not ideal for a lot of people who live in different neighborhoods in the city, but what you do see is varying degrees of those AMIs that get served. So depending on what neighborhood you're in, whether you're along 3rd Avenue in the South Bronx, or if you're in Riverdale, or if you're in Queens or someplace in the city, your AMI is the same no matter which one of the 5 boroughs you are in. But what does fluctuate is that percentage that is being financed. So in some cases, you may hear somebody say we're financing housing at 60% of median income. That targets a very specific income range. Or you may hear a little bit higher at 80% or 90%. And I know I'm throwing out different numbers, but I'm giving this as an example to show you what can be financed as affordable housing. And I'm happy to go into a little bit more of a granular detail here, but just from a big picture, that's how you define it. And you're defining it because it's affordable to somebody and they can have enough income to pay for their other living expenses.
So if you have that broad kind of a range, we've had people come in and tell us, oh, we've got a very affordable situation. We're going to locate, and I remember one in the area of Bailey Avenue. We're going to have one here. We're only going to ask 1/30 of the AMI. The person who gets that thing is going to wind up having to have an income of about $100,000 a year or more. That's not affordable to an awful lot of people. And so the question I have is, with 421A gone, what benefits can a developer look to make it affordable, even though it is not necessarily affordable if you just apply the AMI?
It depends on how you finance your transaction. And there's a few different things that can be looked at. And I'll touch on 3 specific examples because it'll give what I hope it'll give this committee and everybody listening in an idea of the range of tools that are available. So one way you can look at a tool is to have the financing to either allow you to construct a new building or purchase an existing asset. And that's kind of what I will call a capital subsidy. So you're getting money as the owner of a property to provide some level of affordable housing. And that capital that you're getting, which normally will come from a government entity. As an example, the agency I used to run the Housing Development Corporation, or the City of New York's Department of Housing Preservation and Development is another example. But those 2 city agencies can give you access to the low-income housing tax credit. That is one example of an equity source that comes in and allows you to construct. Pooled with other sources allows you to build your building to provide affordable housing. Another example that you may be able to, or another tool you may be able to pull, is something called a property tax exemption. Now, you mentioned the 130 AMIs, which was used under a program called 421A, which has since expired, but the city has other tax exemptions at its disposal. There's something that's called the Article 11, which is a tax exemption, which is a discretionary exemption that's approved by the city council, but that's one example. Or there's something else called the 420C tax exemption. And there's other exemptions as well. So you get a property tax exemption that fixes your taxes for a set time period. In exchange for receiving that benefit, you're providing a different level of affordable housing. A third source, and I'll stop talking after this, so I don't bore you with too many details, is something that's called an operating subsidy. That's something that works, you may hear the phrase Section 8. And what happens there is the tenant receives an additional payment to cover their rent from the federal government. So that's something called an operating subsidy. So I've given you 3 particular examples. One allows you to construct your building or to purchase it. One allows you to fix your operating expenses so you can afford to make a little bit less on your rents because you're not paying as much as other buildings in the area. And the third is something that allows the tenant to supplement their income and pay their rent that way. So those are different examples, and they each come with different levels of affordability that they serve. But and in some cases, you may see all 3 of those examples I just provided in one development.
Gary, if I am correct, HPD, Housing Preservation and Development, is the entity that polices one or more of those things. HDC obviously polices its own, but who else is in this act?
From the city, those are the 2 primary agencies. You may see the New York City Housing Authority, or NYCHA, come in with some Section 8 or operating subsidies as well. At the state level, there's an agency, DHCR, or the Homes and Community Renewal. They provide a similar level of financing, at least with the low-income housing tax credit, and giving you access to some operating subsidies. And then that will replicate as well. But those are probably the 3 primary agencies you'll see, the 2 city agencies you mentioned, Chuck, in addition to the state agency.
Now, to what extent, if any, do those agencies go out and double check to make sure that the housing that is ultimately leased is leased on an affordable housing basis?
They all check, and they all check annually. And I'll to even put a finer point on it, when you are initially leasing up your building, if it's a new construction asset, or when you first purchase an existing building, they will check every single unit and the incomes of those households in every single apartment. After that happens, you have to prepare all your paperwork, and it does get checked. You can get audited annually. But that's a requirement not only of the government agencies, but of the other financing sources as well. And it's a very important component because it's the crux of what we're trying to solve. But to really get into it, the city or the government is putting a number of resources here to provide this benefit to the residents of these buildings. And they spend a fair amount of time confirming that you're doing what you say you're going to do.
To what extent is location integral to the determination that this is a proper site for affordable housing, both economically and otherwise?
It's a critical component. I will say this, we have such a issue with affordable housing in the city that it's hard to find a place where you can't, there's not a need for affordable housing, but it's a critical component. And in particular, when you're thinking about the income levels that you want to serve. You can go through a range of incomes, and I mentioned earlier, what's affordable in the South Bronx may look different than in another neighborhood, but that really gets to the heart of what you're trying to solve, because it needs to be affordable for the people in the city and for the people in the community that you're looking to serve.
And that's the final question I want to touch on with you, and then see if anybody has any questions. To what extent, if any, can government, and theoretically at least community boards are part of the city government under the charter, to what extent can they help guide where there ought to be affordable housing? So, for example, it makes no sense to have what is, quote, affordable housing at 130% of the AMI, located on Bailey Avenue or in Kingsbridge or the like, but it certainly, that area, both those areas require affordable housing. To what extent can government entice people to go into areas where there is a need?
I honestly, I believe it's through the financing programs they've set up, Chuck. I mean, that's a huge part of it. But I think what you're asking is more having a closer touch. So I would say to what the need is in the communities that they're being served. And in part, that comes from their planning units having direct discussions with these various community boards and paying attention to what's really needed. You know, I'm not, there's a number of different things, and I'm no longer in government. So I know there's a number of things that are happening or should happen.
That's
So
government's loss, by the way.
thank you. But I think, you know, HPD has been set up in a manner to really try to work with these different neighborhoods and community boards. My hope, and I believe that's the intent of what they were trying to do with their planning unit. I think that's probably your first step about where you really need to go. And it's elected officials that message gets articulated to the group so that there's a true understanding of what needs to happen. It's not a perfect science, but to me, that's the best way to try to go about this with the system we have to set up right now.
Any questions? And let's keep them just to the issue that has been addressed so far. Are there any questions on that? Will you raise your hand? Rosemary. Now, I have to give you a heads up, Gary. This is one of the smartest people.
Oh, no, stop. So Gary thank you for your presentation. Two very quick questions. And maybe the first is unfair, but of all the programs you mentioned, 421A and Section 8 and HGC, in your mind or your opinion, which of the programs is most likely to be most beneficial to produce affordable housing? Which one is I don't want to say the richest or the best for the developer, which is not my issue. What program is most likely to produce affordable housing? And number two question is, we know 421A is gone. What is the last date at which somebody can apply for 421A right now? Thank you.
So for your first question, it's a little bit tough because it kind of depends on a lot of different things that you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to build a large building, a small building, and everything in between? But to be very honest with you, it's how do you use all of them to get the most benefit? That's what you're really going to see. It's rare that you will see an affordable housing project that only has one of those things I mentioned. So you're likely to see at least two, if not more. And that kind of, depending on how many different sources you may see or different tools coming in, to a certain degree will speak to the level of affordability the developer owner is trying to accomplish. And I'm not trying to skirt around your question. I'm just trying to give you an honest answer about, you really do have to look at bringing a number of different resources in to make that work. And to get to your second question, I actually, and a colleague of mine is on the phone who I haven't introduced yet. So Payman, if you know the answer on the second one, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe the deadline is now passed. If you didn't have a footing in the ground before the 421A expired earlier this year, I believe you missed that point to apply, but Payman, correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct. It was June of this year.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
now, if
Thank
you didn't
you.
start your on that piece, you have to wait for a new program.
I'm going to deal with the land use members first and then the public. So please forgive me.
Sure.
Mr. Pazio. Nick.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you for your presentation. Two questions. I'll start with the one on MIH and one on the LIHTC credits. In your experience, has MIH been an effective policy? Yes or no? And if yes, I guess why or why not has it been effective in your experience, or ineffective? And then in terms of the LIHTC, maybe you could just explain how the LIHTC credits are allocated. I understand they're at a state level, but it seems like New York City, for example, has a much deeper issue in terms of financing affordable housing than some other parts of the country and even some other parts of the state.
So for MIH, I will say, I think it's been a very effective program. I think the intent of what it was hoping to accomplish is something that we're still slowly going to see the benefits of, just because from when it started to now, I think you're just seeing the earlier buildings really start to come online. So I think time will really tell, but from a structural perspective, I'm a huge fan of the project. I'm a little bit biased because I was still in city government when this was being structured. So a lot of what you're saying, my colleagues worked on, and you may see a little bit of some stuff I had a way to do with. But I do think the intent of it is what we need. And the fact that it's permanently affordable in these different areas is going to have a lasting impact on the city. But I think it's just going to take time for everybody to really see those benefits. Just because it's new construction. And again, as I mentioned, those earlier buildings are just starting to come. To get to your second question about the low-income housing tax credit, I think you were just asking about where it comes from and the allocation between the city and the state, but please correct me so I want to make sure I try to answer your question.
Yeah, I mean, I was just, I know that there's a formula that's based on population in terms of the allocations of the credits from HUD. But I'm just not, I'm just not sure of, I was hoping maybe you could explain without getting in too much detail how those credits are allocated and if it's ever possible for New York City, for example, to get more low-income housing tax credits.
Sure. Okay. So there's two types of low-income housing tax credits, right? They're both allocated by the federal government to various cities and states, really, and then the state can sub-allocate to a city. So as you mentioned, New York gets a particular allocation that goes to the state based on our population. That gets further subdivided. So New York City, because of the size of it, we're one of few cities where we get a special allocation directly from that state source. That application is doled out, or those credits are sent, or they're called the 9% tax credit. They are allocated competitively based on an application. You apply a couple times a year from the state, and similar to the city. The city has a smaller pot, which is part of the reason why you've heard some things about challenges getting that funded, because just because it's a smaller resource for a large city. That's really it. The second type of low-income housing tax credit is something called a 4% credit. That comes from part of your financing structure, where either working with the city's Housing Development Corporation, my old agency, or HCR. They issue tax exempt bonds, and then based on that, you get an allocation of low-income housing tax credits. Similarly, it's based on population. And I know I'm using a lot of different things, but I'm just trying to give you the broad overview. But that gets financed separately based on your particular allocated project. So there's a huge pot of money. This debt goes to the state, or an allocation, I should say. The city, similar to the tax credit, gets that allocation, and then they dole it out on a project by project basis. And that's really how it goes. But because of the cost of living in the city and the allocation splitting it with the state, we use every single resource. And I touched on, you kind of see different tools coming into each deal. So whether you're using that 9% credit or you're using the bonds and a different type of credit, you're seeing a number of resources coming in on an annual basis. If you look at New York compared to our other states across the country, we are using the lion's share of all of those allocations, if not 100%.
Vice Chairman of the Board, Mr. Bender.
Thank you, Chuck. I just want to be sure, I see on the agenda, we have affordable housing down a couple of times. Are we going to have a more general discussion on that subject? after this presentation?
There will no, I'm glad you asked that. We are looking to do a two-part program on it before we synthesize our thinking. At the next meeting, I have a request out to another, but this time current public official, who will talk to us about how we can deal with some of these financing things as a community board. And there we will discuss it more. The balance of the agenda after this is particular items that are on the agenda, specific projects that we have to vote on.
Okay, I'll save my more general observations then for the next land use meeting. But for now, Mr. Rodney, thank you very much for the presentation. Can you, I'm unclear on who makes the determination about the geographical region for the AMI. As we discussed at the beginning of the meeting, it includes Westchester, Nassau, and Suffolk, if I understood correctly. Who makes that determination? And given the fact that there is such a disparity between some of the wealthy parts of Westchester and Nassau and the Bronx, what would it take to come up with a more defined geographic region for determining AMI? Who would make that determination?
So it's set by the federal government. So the AMI is set annually by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. I'm honestly not sure what it would take to try to get that changed, but what I can tell you is that standard is the same nationwide. So, and it's used for a number of different financing sources, whether it's the low-income housing tax credit, the Section 8 subsidy, and a whole host of other things. What I can tell you has been done, and in part you see that from the various city and state programs that have been structured, is you see different percentages of those that AMI looking to be served in a particular building. So it may not be the cleanest thing because it's a federal allocation and these funds that the city and state receive are from the federal government. So that's in part why you're seeing those AMI, because there needs to be a standard nationwide. However, but what I will say is, depending on the type of income levels that are being served, you may see something that says we're going to serve projects that are affordable to households at 40% of median income, 50% of median income, and 80%, just to give you an example. And in some place in New York City, that could take you anywhere from 50,000 to 96 or 100,000. I'm giving you a broad range because I mentioned a couple, but in part why I'm doing that is you're seeing different income targets being structured in these programs, and that's one way to try to address the AMI concern of having these different income levels there, or different, I should say, counties in there.
So who decides that it's going to be 40% of AMI versus 120% of AMI? Who makes that determination?
Those are set up by the various programs of this from the city and state. So
I
they
see.
have different finance depending on which sources they are using. And depending on where your project is located and costs and everything, a developer owner may look to leverage those different resources, but that is structured by the program that you're looking to use.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody has got my screen up as share, so I'm being blocked. Can you fix that, Kira? While I'm
Sure.
doing, while
I'm
you're
sorry, I
doing
don't know
it,
why someone sharing their screen. Sorry about that.
Dan Paternak.
Actually, Bob Bender kind of touched on it, but, Mr. Rodney, thank you for coming out for the presentation. But, there's a lot to be said about AMI, and a lot of folks make a big deal out of it. However, the agency that would be giving the subsidy, along with the developer, would determine what the income targets for each particular project would be, right? Meaning, if a developer came in and saw that there were certain credits available for 30% of AMI, and they spread different income bands across a project, and quite frankly, the AMI wouldn't have as much of, effect on limiting lower income folks on a particular project. Meaning you can put in an income band of, say, 20% AMI in the same project that you're doing a 40% AMI, in the same project where you're doing an 80%, and spread the income bands across a particular building.
That is possible. You still have to find enough sources to cover it.
Correct.
So.
And that would, yes, and that would come from, say, HPD or from any other program that was subsidizing the particular project.
But yes, that's a potential source, correct.
At which point the high income levels on the AMI would become less important if you do have agencies coming in and subsidizing it at different levels.
If you can secure that's enough financing, which is
Yes.
a big if, but yes.
Yes, yes. Thank you. That was the question. And
Yeah.
just following up on Bob Ventures. Thank you.
Ms. Carlson.
Yes, thank you. I have several questions, but my first question is very basic, and I need to have it answered before I can ask any of my others. And that is, what time did this meeting start?
7 o'clock.
Okay, because I came in about 2 minutes after 7, and I wasn't sure if I had missed something. I'm listening to this conversation, and I feel like,
Can you get to your question, please?
sure, I have several of them. And they may be answered when we have the presentation. But what I am curious about in this process is how someone like myself, who lives at 180 Van Cortlandt Park South, which is right next to the proposed building project at the visitation site, is only finding out about this process.
Thank you.
Now, at this juncture, where things seem to be done.
Ma'am, We'll
And I'm-
deal, ma'am.
Well,
we'll
excuse
deal
me.
with that. No, ma'am. We'll
No?
deal with, no, we'll deal with that project after this general presentation. This is not part of that program. You did miss that in the beginning. Mr. Hunt.
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. I was just curious, with any of these tax credit programs that will be received, is there any language or any of the tax credit programs that stand out more than others, that have stronger language in ensuring that workers will be getting paid a fair wage and safe working conditions and other things that building trades unions provide? Or actually, I should ask, are unions, is this going to be built with using the building trades unions in New York City?
That is not the intent, that it would be built by the union trade. There may be some union trades in there, but it won't be 100% building trade project.
Mr. Hunt and Ms. Carlson, we've asked Gary Rodney to play a role over and above his representation of Tishman Speyer on the first project on the agenda. We've asked him to be able to educate the board on what affordable housing is, because it's something very different than most people understand it to be. It's a fairly complex area. The first item on the agenda will be the project on Van Cortlandt, and we will address those questions there at that time. I apologize, but it was the only way I could persuade them to spend the time to devote to this one area of getting an education. All
I
right,
appreciate your time.
Deborah Travis.
Hi, thank you, Chuck, and thank you, Mr. Rodney, for tonight for this presentation. It's really helpful. One of my questions is actually the flip side of AMI, because what I observe often is that the rent that you actually pay, regardless of what your AMI is often a bit high, because they're always going to charge maximum rent for that AMI. Who sets the percentage, the rent that goes with each step of AMI, particularly on the lower, for very low income and low income? They're paying $700 a month and they're making $23,000 a year. It doesn't leave a lot of room for groceries and stuff.
Those rents are, it's really set by the government agency. So again, it goes back to the particular financing program. It goes back to the particular financing program, but it's also a function of the financing sources. So it's, if you're using the low-income housing tax credit, for example, there's very specific guidelines as to what you can charge based on the AMIs. And then the city or the state will say, this is the rent that you're allowed to charge. In addition to that, what they do is there's a deed restriction, right? So all of these affordable housing projects have a deed restriction where the owner agrees that they're going to cap the income of the residents to a certain dollar amount. And in some cases, you'll see with the city and state, they get very particular about the rents that are being charged. Now, those rents change over time because, you know, cost of living adjustments, inflation and things like that. But in terms of the base and who it's affordable to, initial is federal government and then a little bit more refined by either the city or state, depending on who you're doing. But that's laid out. You should be able to find it on their website or in the financing term sheets.
But like I was just quoting from like the HPD program. So just to make sure I understand what you're saying is that if I am a developer and this is an HPD project, then the rents, the maximum rent that can be charged for my program is set by HPD. And that in order to influence that, that would be done through the federal government, yes? Or is that state?
It's, you're accurate. It's just slightly federal government first and then HPD. So it's kind of federal and then your state or local municipality is the way to think about it.
And then how often is it refreshed? Do those
Annual,
tables?
once a year.
Okay, thank you.
So for 2022, those numbers were released somewhere around March. Usually you see it somewhere between March and April. Is in some cases you may see it in February, but usually around that time of year is when it gets released.
Okay, thank you.
Let me interrupt before I just take the next question. Am I correct that when developers utilize the services of HDC to try and put together a project, a developmental project, then bonds frequently are issued for the purpose of financing that project? Some are taxable, some are not taxable. I apologize, Gary. Let me do Ms. Ahmadi before I go.
Hi, Mr. Rodney. Thank you so much for your time and your informative overview. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I had a question regarding what factors are used to determine not the AMI, but the number of affordable units per development.
The number really goes back to what how you're structuring your transaction. So we talked about the 421A program earlier. In some cases, you could get your project financed, and that may only require that, you know, a third or 20% of your units are affordable. Some of these other sources that I had mentioned, whether it was 420C or Article 11 or any of these other resources that come in, normally it's 100%, but in some cases it's a slightly different number. But again, it goes back to how you're structuring the financing of your deal. But if that's really the answer. Again, you may see something slightly different, like if it was the old 421A or something like that.
So if I understand you correctly, it is possible based on the financing mechanisms you choose to have a building of 100% affordable housing?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Chuck, I don't know, you're on mute, I'm not sure.
Chuck, you've muted yourself.
Maybe, oh, there he is.
Thank you. When the former borough president of the Bronx had a very specific intent, it was to get as much affordable housing in targeted areas wherever he could get it and scrounge for it. And one of the things that he gave those people from the Bronx who were on the HDC and the like was to ask them to move those applications, and you will remember that kind of an approach of trying to move that and get that done. To what extent is that a vehicle or anything else to increase the availability of affordable housing? And by affordable housing, for my purposes in these discussions, it isn't 130% of the AMI. That's not affordable for most people. I'm looking at those kind of things that are affordable for real people who make modest incomes. Is HDC a vehicle that is one that can be used?
Absolutely. HDC is, as is HCR, as is HPD. And in some cases, you even touched on, you can go to your borough president or your local council member and try to extract additional sources to provide a deeper level or additional level of affordability. I should say one thing that I neglected to mention earlier, from a federal standpoint, what's considered affordable housing, and this is nationally now, is something that is around 80% or below of your median income. So that's the federal standard. In higher cost cities such as New York, Chicago, and other coastal cities, what's considered affordable is a slightly larger number, just because of the cost of living in those particular markets is so high that you can still be considered affordable if you're providing housing to somebody who's maybe at 100%. And, just to go into a little bit further detail, in New York City, if you're a family of three, right, to be considered somewhere around 80% of median income, I want to say that your household is somewhere around 97,000. Now, that, just to put it into context, if somebody is a municipal worker, and for me, a municipal worker will be, maybe you work for the MTA, maybe you work for a government agency, or maybe you're a firefighter or a police officer, right? So if you're that, and you have, or a teacher, so maybe you have a police officer and a teacher and they have one child, that puts you in that 80% range, as an example.
Thank you. Who is DT? I can only recognize you as DT.
Hello, I'm a community member and similar to Ms. Carlson. I had questions about the proposed project across the street from Beckwoodland Park.
Can you hold that till we get to that item, Mr. DT?
Yes, thank you.
And I will get to you, Ms. Carlson and Mr. Hunt, right at the beginning of that discussion, all right?
I actually had a general question, if I could be
Good, then
permitted
let's
to
do
ask
it.
it.
Let's do
Yes, which is I'm listening to this conversation, which I am in fact paying attention to. And my question is, when, as I'm listening to people speak, I'm hearing the concern, the primary concern be for the people who would be living in the affordable housing. How can they afford it? How much of their income, et cetera, and so on. And I am wondering, in general, when these calculations are made, how the impact to the existing community is calculated in those decisions, how that will affect, for example, things like property values for the people who live in the immediate vicinity of the affordable housing. Because that seems to me to be a part of the equation that I have not heard about. I have heard a lot of concern about the people who would be living in these units. I have not heard concern about the people who are already living in the area. So that is my general question.
Good question.
Concerning affordable housing.
Good question. Gary, am I correct that that is the hope of the agent, that the agencies will focus on that and the community boards? Am I wrong in that?
Yes, they definitely pay attention to it. But to be honest, I pay attention to it too. Like it's something that, especially when you're in the affordable housing world, for the most part, and I don't want to say every single person is, you're going to hold on to these assets for a long time, right? So you want to be in a situation where you own an asset that continues to be successful. That is helpful. That improves, and it should be good not only for you financially, but for the surrounding community, because that all plays into it, right? So we all want something that's successful. And when I enter into a new neighborhood, as I'm doing here or any place else, I look at this as I'm coming into this community as well, right? And that's how our firm, Tishman Speyer, looks at this. So
Will you be living here?
I will not be living
Well,
here.
then you're not
but-
coming into this community. Just saying,
Okay. that's
in
fair.
general.
I understand that. I was just trying to give you the perspective that we're not trying to come in and leave. We're gonna be a member here like a lot of other people. And I may not be living here, but I still will care exactly what's happening. And we try to put that forth in the program that we put together.
Okay, because I am curious about where affordable housing gets built and who makes the decisions. And in general, as I've been told to keep this too, and about who's making the decisions. This is the first time I have heard anything from the community board. And I'm wondering how many of them will be living next to the affordable housing. So I'm just curious about that part of the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nick,
Hi, thank you. Gary, you've been more than kind to us and generous with your time, so I'll try to make it quick. Just for clarity, I think it's, as I understand it, is if there were 100% building that was affordable, for instance, the issue would be trying to attract capital to that building. If you don't have government sources, you have to get it through your LP investors. If it's a bifurcated building, it's like 80-20 or 70-30, the more affordability you have, theoretically, you have to make that up someplace else, either through some, public source or by actually increasing rents. So I guess my point is that, as you made clear, this is not an easy, we have this problem for a reason. It's been ongoing for a reason because there's no real easy answer. But I just wanted to, clarify what some people said. Well, and I think you alluded to it. You can't have an 100% affordable building. The issue is how are you going to get the capital necessary to build that building and make it sustainable?
That's absolutely right.
all right. I think I want to thank you, Gary. I appreciate you taking the time. Bad enough you had to come see us on the other issue, or good enough, but I thank you for giving us the effort. I will tell you one thing to the people on board. I have been on HDC for, I think, probably over 20 years. And during that time, I can tell you candidly, the person who did the most for building housing of all kinds was Gary Rodney, and he did it well. And the public has every right to really be proud of him, as I am. All right, we will now go to the rest of the agenda, and item number 1 is the Van Cortlandt project. Gary, are you going to make the presentation, or somebody else from your shop?
I am. So thank you, Chuck, and thank you to.
Can I ask you to hold up? I am required by the Conflict of Interest Board to make a disclosure. One of the entities that has an involvement in terms of encouraging all of this is the United Federation of Teachers. I have been counsel to the United Federation of Teachers for more years than I was on the board of HDC. I have had no involvement in this matter, simply because I will not involve myself in any project in this community area of any kind, nature, or description. In fact, I didn't even know that the project was coming this way until after I talked to Gary. I make the disclosure. It does not in any way require recusal, but I wanted to make the disclosure to comply with COIB requirements. Okay, Gary, you're on.
Thank you, Chuck. And thank you to the rest of the committee for the opportunity for me to introduce myself and to the community and to present a project that, I'm personally and Tishman Speyer is very excited about. I know I've been talking to you for a little bit, but just the formal introduction. My name is Gary Rodney. I oversee the affordable and workforce housing platform here at Tishman Speyer. I've been with Tishman Speyer for about 2 years now to launch this new platform, which we call TS Communities. And I really focus on the development and purchase of affordable and workforce housing. I've been doing this for over 20 years. As you heard from Chuck, I spent a number of years in government. I also worked in a nonprofit and with an affordable housing developer. So I've done a number of different things here specifically in New York City, and I've also financed and created affordable housing nationally as well. So I'm very familiar with the space and I've done a number of different things. Joining me as well is my colleague Payman Lodi, and I'll stop for a moment so he can introduce himself.
Thank you, Gary, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking the time. As Gary mentioned, my name is Payman Lodi. I'm the Senior Director of External Affairs for Tishman Speyer. I joined the company last year after 15 years in government and nonprofit work focusing on urban planning and public affairs. Most notably for this group, I served as the district manager for Community Board 10 in Central Harlem, so I have a special appreciation for the importance of community engagement. And we look forward to a productive relationship starting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Payman. So Payman will be our point person kind of for really all the community engagement, as he mentioned. But obviously I'm here and we have a whole team and the whole company is behind us as well. And look, I'll be very honest with you, we always try to build a relationship with any community that we enter. I mentioned before, this is something where it's a new business for us, one, but more importantly, this is a place where we intend to be in this neighborhood owning this asset for an extended time period. We're not looking to kind of build this and then we're going to exit tomorrow. So we're here tonight because we want to be a good neighbor, and we don't just develop buildings. We'd like to develop this lasting relationship with the communities and with all the partners who help make this actually happen. For those of you who are just not familiar with Tishman Speyer, I thought it would be helpful to talk just a little bit about the company itself, and then I can go in specifically about the proposed project. So our president and CEO is a gentleman by the name of Rob Speyer. And his general ethos, or his kind of perspective, which filters through the entire firm, is that our core mission is to focus around the experience that the residents or the people in our office buildings have in the spaces that we build. So the company has been around for over 100 years. Today, we manage over 87 million square feet of space globally, and that's across close to 160 properties in the United States, throughout Europe, China, Brazil, and India. And we have over 1,250 employees. And just to give you a sense of some of the assets we own here in New York, it's Rockefeller Center, the MetLife building, Yankee Stadium, and over at Hudson Yards, we're nearly completing a new office building called the Spiral. To date, I know we're mostly known as an office developer, and that's what many people know us as, but we've also developed close to 30 residential properties with over 15,000 units of housing, spanning over 12.5 million square feet. Now, that's everything the firm has done. I launched a new business 2 years ago. In addition to talking about this particular project in the Bronx, we're out there looking to purchase affordable housing projects across the country, existing assets that we can build and preserve. And most notably, we recently acquired a parcel at the end of last year in the Far Rockaway section of Queens called Edgemere Commons. And I just highlighted it to give you an example of the other type of projects that we're looking to do in the affordable platform. There, we're going to be developing part of the Edgemere Commons development, which when complete will have over 2,000 units of affordable housing, a significant sizable amount of retail space and community facility as well. So I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that this is a larger production for Tishman Speyer, and something that we're very committed to, and that we're jumping in full feet to get accomplished. I will stop for a moment to share my screen to specifically talk a little bit about the Van Cortlandt Park project. Just give me a moment. Now, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So as you know, we're here to discuss the 160 Van Cortlandt Park South project. As you are aware, the SCA presented their plans to this community board back in December for a new 700-seat public school on a portion of the site. Since that point in time, when the SCA was here, we recently finalized an agreement with the SCA to purchase this site from the Archdiocese of New York, which happened a couple weeks ago. This will allow us to do two distinct projects. The SCA will develop a school on their particular parcel. And again, this is obviously the existing site where you have the church, the rectory, and the former school on 239th Street. But the school will develop a 700-seat public school. We, on the opposite, in the majority of the site, will be developing a 340-unit affordable housing development that's fully as of right. This gives you an example. You'll see the school is located on the Review Place side on the western side of the site, and the eastern side from Van Cortlandt down Putnam and on 239th will be the affordable housing project. Our goal is to start construction sometime next year and get us into completion by the end of 2025. This gives you a little bit of an overview of an example of one of the things that we are looking to do at the particular site. This particular vantage point shows from Putnam Avenue West and Van Cortlandt Park South, as you'll see in the lower right-hand corner here. And I apologize, I just wanted to go back to look at my screen for a second. Because of the unique nature of this particular development and us building next to the school, you can rest assured that we're in constant communication with the SCA on coordination of our design and construction of our buildings. And this also includes staging, traffic, and parking. I should also note that I know parking is going to be a topic that we should be discussing. We're planning to provide 70 units of parking, which is what we're provided to do as of right. I understand there may be desires to need more parking there. To be very honest, with our proximity to the subway and the transportation access there, we're not entirely sure if more parking is going to be needed. We have been taking the time to look at what's available in the neighborhood to the extent that we need some overflow parking. We're looking to see what options are available, but I just wanted to mention that the 70 spaces are what we're required to do as of right. I will also point out that we understand that the existing conditions of the site are not ideal. We purchased the site on August 16th. We have hired a security company to patrol the site. And then we're erecting a fence and working through the paperwork to get ready to start the demolition of the school, the church, and the rectory. So it's not the best situation, but we do have security on site to ensure that there are no issues. And we're going through our process so that we can get the fence up and start the demolition as soon as possible. This particular vantage point that I have on the screen, I know it's been on, this particular point is on the 239th Street side. This is Putnam Avenue West. This is 239th Street here. And I know it's not the best angle, but you can also see entrance to the parking, which is on the 239th Street side. I just wanted to point it out that it's in the left-hand corner here. I'd like to talk a little bit specifically about what we're looking to do at the site and our plan for the housing. So the plan, as I mentioned, will be 340 units. As you can see here, the majority of the units will be 1 and 2 bedrooms, but we also have 30% of the units at 2s and 3s. We expect 60% of the units to be affordable to folks from 40 to 80% of median income, which is roughly about 204 units. And I'll go into the range in a moment. I just wanted to talk through at a high level what we're looking to do. 40% of the units, or about 136 of those units, will be affordable to families earning between 80 and 110% of AMI. Now, to go into actual dollars, just to give you an idea of what those incomes are, if you're talking about a family of 3, on the lower end, that 40% gets you around $48,000 a year, to roughly about 133 on the higher end. I know that's a broad range, but I wanted to give you a sense of the high and the low with these different income ranges that we're talking about. And you'll see this last point, as with all city programs that go through the housing lottery, there's a 50% preference for any applicants that are from Community Board 8, which means we submit all of these potential residents submit all these applications as part of the process when we're building the building. It's randomly selected through a housing lottery, and anybody who lives in Community Board 8 gets moved up to the top of that list. And once we hit 50%, then we go to the general list. But I just wanted to give an overview about what we were talking about there.
Chuck, can I interject very quickly?
Can I just say two more things and then?
No,
David, let Mr. Rodney finish the presentation, please.
So I just wanted to kind of go back and talk a little bit. I know I gave you a little bit of a range on the income levels, but the last thing I wanted to say before I stop is I know there's a broad range there, but every single resident in this project and any affordable housing project that gets financed in this city is a long-term resident, which means you're going to have at least a 12-month lease. And the intent here is that we're providing housing that's affordable to people at these different income levels. So they have the income so they can go and spend a disposable income, whether it's grocery shopping and other things in the particular neighborhood. But the intent are these are people who will be not only residing here, but actually be working people who are actually going to be contributing members to the surrounding community.
Are you pausing now, Gary?
Yes, I'm sorry. I just wanted to mention that particular piece. I'm happy to answer any questions. And in some cases, if it's not me, I may call on payment to help.
All right, let me just make one observation, one more. Mr. Pueno, you wrote an email earlier today. It has been received and is part of the file on this application. And I didn't want you to think we had not focused on it. I thank you for it. All right, David, you're on.
okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, in that second to last slide, you mentioned Community Board 8 preference. I think what you really meant to say, and I think this distinction is important, is Community District 8, residents of the district, not members of the Community Board.
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay, so you may want to correct that slide. I do have a question or three about this. I was really puzzled trying to figure out how you were going to get approximately 40 apartments per floor on half the site. But I see now that your building is going to take more than 3/4 of the site, which means that which I thought was going to be a small school is going to be a really small school. And your graphic doesn't include the 2,500 square feet of outdoor space for whatever. And even at that, that's really small because the 2,500 that was mentioned to us about the school is the size of a basketball court. And I don't know how you're going to get 738 kids onto that basketball court for attendance before school. And or I had maybe a quarter or a fifth of them be able to go out and play ball during recess, each of the 3 or 4 recess sessions during the day. I do have a specific question for you, though. It was reported in the Riverdale Press that the Archdiocese received $29 million for the site. Was that completely paid for by Tishman, or did the SCA contribute to the $29 million? And if so, how much?
It was a combination of both of us. I don't have the official breakdown between the two.
Roughly, I imagine you know roughly what they are.
I apologize. I've got 3 different projects in my head right now. Let me get back to you. But I just don't want to misquote. So let me get back to you and we'll figure out the right answer. But I just wanted to flag, you raised a number of concerns about the school, the 2,500 square feet, and obviously we're not constructing the school, right? The SCA is in charge of that. They're designing it and they're in charge of construction. So I will leave them to speak through everything about that. What I will say is the 2,500 square feet is a playground that's in our courtyard. It's not the only thing they're designing. I will let them walk through it because I don't want to misrepresent everything. That's a smaller playground for the younger kids, and they have another plan for the older students, but they should walk you through that because I don't have for all of their specifics, and I don't want to misrepresent that.
Okay, thank you.
Let me make a point. One of the issues that has been raised is the question of the negative declaration. That will be the subject of a separate hearing on the 29th. I believe the chair has given notice of that hearing, and that will go forward then. Hopefully we'll get some cooperation out of SCA. Personally, it wouldn't count on it. Mr. Fanuzzi.
Chuck, thank you. I'm concerned and not a little horrified by what I see. This really does compromise the educational space that SCA presented to us. And I'm a little horrified because I didn't know that SCA has practice or right to act as a real estate agent of property it acquired from the diocese. So I really don't know, and I intend to find out the law and the practice or traditions or precedent by which the SCA can redistribute real estate that was acquired for the purpose of constructing a school. So the wraparound that I see here really does compromise, obviously, school. Obviously, it's not your, it's not you. You took the deal, and you want to get into affordable. So we understand it's a really increasing market in the city of New York. We are very aware of that. But I really need to know, Chuck and Laura, whether the SCA has the authority to redistribute, sell off, especially after having presented a plan publicly the way they have before. So the other thing I would like to say, and I'll definitely, I come back to that, Chuck, I'm sure you have insight on that.
I do.
But the other thing I would like to stress to you is that we are observing the 1-year anniversary of Hurricane Ida. You are building in a floodplain. In fact, USGS in its postmortem on Ida, and I'm sure you know the pictures of the Major Deegan Expressway, I don't need to go into that, has deemed this a very high need, high risk area, okay, for flooding. I see nothing in this construction, including the impervious surface, which passes for a green space in the middle of this, which will mitigate flooding. And our highway has already been closed 3 times since Ida, okay, due to sewer backup, due to runoff. So you are building in a very dangerous area for the community. So we need to know that you are up to speed on the latest DEP requirements for the unified stormwater rules, which I understand many people have an interest in here. And also you need to understand that you are contributing a lot of wastewater now through additional units, residential space, to already sewers that I don't need to tell you are at capacity and presenting a real public emergency on a regular basis now. So I don't like what happened with the SCA. I think it's very troublesome. And I'm gonna really think that there is definitely an environmental impact of building in a flood zone.
Bob, two things by way of answer. One is I will put you and Karen Argenti, and if she wants to, Deb Travis, in touch with the people at Tishman Spire as they walk down the road. You will find them cooperative, I think, in terms of the environmental issues. The issue with respect primarily to the environmental concerns you've spoken to are the ones that come out of their negative declaration.
Yes.
Which both the chair of this board and I have significant problems with, and I think anyone who reads it has. That's an SCA issue. The second question is there a precedent? I have to plead guilty. About 15, 20 years ago, as counsel to the UFT, we found that and were asked by the then borough president to do something about providing housing for teachers in the Melrose area as an inducement to getting teachers into the area. And so what the UFT did was it purchased bonds from HDC, which in turn financed the housing. And so what you had was a combination of housing, educational input, and the like. That is not an unusual event. It hasn't been done enough, in my opinion, in terms of trying to provide accommodations for civil servants who need it, and you need them in the neighborhood. We need to provide housing for the cops and the firemen who work in this community. We need to provide it for teachers, we need to provide it for others. If my understanding is correctly, they're probably the target population here. But I wanted you to know what I know about it. Marty.
Chuck, thanks. I just need to know that SCA is acting right now in a real estate agent capacity, redistributing property when it suits it. And I don't like it because the developer didn't get it directly from the diocese. The SCA is acting as a go-between. I don't think it's its function. I appreciate what you said, Chuck. Thank you.
Okay. Understand, I was not aware of any of this, not involved in any part of it.
Understood.
Marty.
Just a clarification. My understanding from seeing the plans presented by SCA was that the school, the new school, was going to be in exactly the same side of the old school. Your diagram doesn't indicate that.
That is correct.
Let me interrupt. There have been a number of areas where there have been gaps between what we were told or not told by SCA. SCA's responsiveness in this instance has been less than zero.
I don't know what you were told, so I can't speak to that. I can speak to the fact that we're still in the midst of designing and moving things. So we did look at one point in time having the school on the 239th Street side, and for a number of different reasons, it got shifted to where you see now. So I'm not sure if when you spoke to the SCA, we were still in that particular stage. Again, I wasn't part of it, so I don't want to speak to that, but I do want to flag, we've looked at it on a couple of different portions of the site. What I showed you this evening is where where we landed, but I just wanted to put that out there.
We have diagrams from SCA, which we can share with you, which told us where the school site would be.
So let me make a suggestion, Marty. Bob Fanuzzi and Karen Argenti, if she wants to, Deb Travis, will patch into this with the people. And if you will give Bob a copy of those diagrams or whatever, he'll get them over to the people at Tishman Spire. Dan Patterson.
Hi, Chuck. I've got a couple questions about the project. Is it possible to pull up the lot coverage slide that we had before? I don't know if Kira has the presentation or if you do, Mr. Rodney, but I'd like to pull up the lot coverage slide.
Which, I'm sorry. Hold on.
It shows the overview where with the school kind of on the side, and it shows the, I guess it would be a C shape of your project with the courtyard. It was towards the beginning.
So not this one, this one.
Nope. That could probably do the, well, yeah, that one could do, oh, yep, perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
no, I
That
will
looks
admit
good.
this isn't done to scale. This was just
No.
an example to give you a sense of how we're trying to lay it out.
Understood. So this will show basically the two concerns that I have, and hopefully your team can address them. The first is traffic in the surrounding area, given the narrow streets that surround this. What I don't see here is really a traffic flow plan for 339 residences. Even the entrance, if I was correct, you have on the northeast corner, which at least from my remedial knowledge, I would say is not the ideal place for cars to pull over for an entrance. considering that, 20 feet away from that, or 30 feet away from it, I should say, is the entrance to the Major Deegan South, and you have a lot of traffic there.
Okay.
So having the entrance on the corner, I think is going to lead to some trouble. But perhaps if you can just shed some light where in this, diagram, we're going to see, the garage entrance, where the trash is going to be picked up, where the moving trucks would be for the loading zones. So that way we have an idea of the traffic flow. The second point, if you guys can address it, is the setbacks. It looks like you guys are pretty much built to the street. Maybe this is just a bad diagram, but if you can kind of clarify that for me as well. I don't see any setbacks on the sidewalk where there might be some green features on the street.
Okay, I'm sorry. Understood. I thank you for flagging it. I will have to talk. We looked at a couple of different points on the entrance. Let me just go back to that. But I hear what you are saying, and we'll go back and take another look at what was being considered in terms of the entrance and why this made more sense versus others.
And yeah, just I understand the entrance, but on the other points, like where are the trucks where's the loading for the garbage, the loading for the moving trucks? Where's the garage gonna be?
The garage will be on the 239th Street side, which I know I don't have a direct photograph or rendering to show you. It was off in the corner.
It was actually on that diagram. There was a little black.
There's a small slit, but it's
The other question, to the extent you consider it or not, to the extent you need to follow up, was a driveway ever considered on any part of this property to take the cars off the street for loading and unloading? And again, these are all the streets around you are narrow, and the widest street that you have there being Van Cortlandt Park South is heavily trafficked. Just because you've got the highway there, you've got the park there. It's not an ideal traffic location. Obviously, this is going to be a larger scale development. So these are all questions I know the community will have, and to the extent we can plan around them, I know we would really like to see some planning involved in it. And I think the setbacks are a part of that as well. So, the building's not on the street. I think that kind of has, kind of a looming effect on the surrounding area. And I would just raise those issues to your project team to see if there's anything you guys can do.
Sure, and just on the setbacks, I will say we're doing everything that's allowed under zoning, and there are some setbacks. You just can't see it on the two angles I have, but there are some setbacks there. Maybe we can.
But this isn't quality housing, right? It's not under QHS standards where there are required setbacks.
No, I actually.
Not like an R8A. It doesn't have an A designation.
Let me make a suggestion.
Let me come back to you on those points, though.
Okay, thank you.
I understand the questions that were raised. Look, I can't promise we're going to change everything, but I will definitely take a look at it. I'll instruct the team to go back, and we've spent a fair amount of time on this, but it's a very fair point. We'll look at it, and maybe what we'll do is we'll go back to the district manager and try to coordinate that way if that works for everybody.
Let me suggest, Dan, if you and your successor as chair of traffic and transportation will put together whatever questions you have on the traffic and transportation, we'll get them to Gary, and one of his folks will work directly with the chair of the committee and get that done.
Okay, thank you, John.
Sure.
Ms. Coggins. Stephanie, where are you?
I'm very, all right. Hi, everyone. I just want to echo a couple of things that I've heard from some of the board members, just based on my observation of the plan. I'm seeing just a gigantic concrete building. I'm not seeing any green space. It was brought up by Mr. Fanuzzi that the interior courtyard for the children's recreation is an impervious space. Is there any green space? Are there any green space elements incorporated into this plan? Because I'm just seeing concrete straight to the sidewalk. and just a few stick trees stuck up there. This is a community that prides itself on green space, and I find that this particular design is very urban and completely out of sync with the surrounding buildings, or the surrounding community in general. I know this is down on, on Broadway, but on the Broadway area, but I'm still concerned about those things. Did anyone hear me?
Yeah, we heard you.
Okay.
I heard you. Look, we value green space. It's something that we always look to incorporate into our design.
I'm seeing none of it though. None. No green space at all.
I understand. We have some plantings around the property, and we've looked at expanding some space on the roof, which I understand you cannot see from where you are, and especially from the street or from the renderings that I showed. But it's something that we pay attention to, and I'll, go back and have another discussion with the design team to make sure that we've done everything that we can there.
That doesn't sound like very much to me. It sounds like a bone. I think that the setbacks are important. And yeah, what about this interior courtyard? Can you incorporate some real green space in there instead of just putting cement with some AstroTurf on it?
There was no intent to put any AstroTurf anywhere.
Okay, perhaps it just looks that way in the illustration.
No, that was not the intent. So I'm not sure what gave that, but that was not.
I think if I may suggest, I think we need a new set of renderings that we can pass around to the community so they can see what's going on, if we can. All right. Karen, one moment, Rosemary Ginty.
Thank you, Chuck. I think this presentation, very grateful for it. Thank you. But in my experience on the board, it's a bit thin. The presentation is a bit thin. I do not see open space. I don't see zoning calculations. I don't see the size of the apartments. I don't see, as I think Dan Paternak commented on, traffic flow, curb cuts, which way are cars going in, coming out. So it's a bit thin. We are used to seeing more information than was presented. So I want to make a suggestion. Quick, no one will pay attention to me. I'm going to make the suggestion anyway. This is a huge block. There is a lot going on in this block. The school is big. What, 700 students and 340 units? This is a big use of property in Community Board 8. The school presentation, if everybody remembers it, I don't think it was well advertised in the community. People didn't know to come out to speak about it. This is the very first meeting of land use, appropriately so. It's on. Thank you for coming and presenting what you did. I have to say, these two things, they almost had to be viewed together, because there is a cumulative impact of these two projects on this community. And however the leadership of this board would like to do it, I think the community needs to have more information on both of these and be able to come out and speak to what they view the issues to be, whether it be open space, greenery, traffic, curb cuts, parking, school buses, whatever it may be. And I think this is an intensive use of a block, a city block in our community, right across from Van Cortlandt Park, right at the entrance to the Major Deacon. This is very, very significant piece of property. So I would urge whoever would like to agree with me that there needs to be more community exposure to what these are and viewing them together.
Here, here.
There was
Exactly. Thank you, Rosemary.
Mr. Chair, you comment that nobody is happy with the negative deck on the school. Well, of course, nobody's happy with it because we had no ability to put any issues into SCA to examine or explore. It just, there it was, and they did it, and boom, we got a negative deck. We didn't participate in any way, shape, or form in that school. We can't turn the clock back. I understand that. But I think we can, with a decent site plan, look at open space and traffic and curb cuts, and we can look at how this block will affect our community, especially this particular neighborhood. I just have, I feel obliged to ask this. At the beginning, Mr. Chair, you said that, you know, that there's not that you have a conflict, but you wanted to put forward your relationship with the UFT or your law firm or whatever. I want to raise a question to you, and it relates to a similar thing. I received an email from an officer of this board today that said the following, that as part of the committee that worked with the Archdiocese on this site's future, you, meaning me, were clearly passionate about the future of this site. I want to ask you, and I want to ask anybody who knows, is anybody aware of any committee that worked with the Archdiocese on the future of this site? Anybody?
Not I.
Good, thank you, and neither am I. So I would like it stated once and for all. There was no private committee that dealt with the Archdiocese on this site, and I certainly was not part of any committee that did not exist. Okay.
As you know, Counsel for the Archdiocese and the board have been in touch on a variety of programs. I haven't spoken to anybody from the Archdiocese for a couple of years. The last time was Hebrew Home.
But there's no committee. There was no committee.
Laura,
Thank you.
any?
Rosemary, understood. I want to say I agree with the comments, Bob Fanuzzi, Rosemary, Dan, on the need for details moving forward. I also have a couple of questions. The buildings have been built in the early 1950s. I'm concerned about asbestos when you demolish them and the surrounding community. I don't know if you're treating this as one lot or two in terms of remediation on the soil. I understand School Construction Authority is replacing the fill, that there was pollution from outside and from the early fill. Are your engineers looking at this, and are you going to be doing similar remediation for all this construction? And finally, the staging during your 30 months of construction, will the project be staged on the property or off the property? You know, what is your plans? Because that is, there's no space outside. Let me see. I also, it hasn't been explained about the permanent easement arrangement for the school playground. And this playground is inadequate. The footprint of your building is very big. Is there any possibility of some reconstruction, you know, of your plan? Sorry, it's a lot of questions. Go ahead.
Let me make a suggestion, Gary. We have, I believe, on the 29th of this month, SCA coming in.
No, I have to correct you. We have gotten word that SCA is not going to come in. They are expecting comments, questions, and they will answer, but they are not coming in. the comment period is open, but unfortunately, they are not coming.
Then
And
let
by
me-
law, by the secret law, they don't have to come on a neg deck. I'm
then let
sorry
me
to
make
say.
this suggestion, if SCA is unwilling to come in, then maybe what we would do is to say to them, don't ever bother, ever filing an application in this board again of any kind, nature, or description. Because that kind of arrogance on the part of government is intolerable. So I think we ought to restate the invitation to them. It's wrong. And I will do what I can to see what I can get some.
Yeah, and I've
sense-
also spoken to our elected officials about this.
Chuck, just as a point of information, Chuck, that there is a time period to challenge the SCA negative declaration from the time that it was made. For any folks who are interested in that.
That would be a lawsuit. Am I correct?
Well, I just want to be clear because we're saying that SCA is, that there's, it's done. I'm just saying that there is a period of time to challenge a negative declaration.
But that would be, I mean, but from what I understand, it would be a lawsuit. Am I correct, Dan?
Any folks
But
can look
to
up that
challenge,
general information on
yeah.
their own.
Right, I don't believe there's an administrative process for it. Laura's correct that you would have to sue.
Kira, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, for what it's worth, SCA got back to the invitation that they weren't coming at this juncture, but they'd come further down. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, thank you. They said they would come for design construction with the board, with the Department of Education. They will come later. They do not come for neg decks. Thank you, Kira.
Kara, I will dictate to you a letter to SCA. They will come. You can count on their coming, or they need not ever, 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 as long as I'm on this board, ever come back to the board on any issue at any time.
Thank you, Chuck.
And indeed, it might be an appropriate place to eliminate SCA.
In regard to the few questions that I asked, having to do with the remediation for the soil, the staging, are you prepared to answer the nitty gritty?
So, one, you asked about asbestos, we're in the process of getting ready to start a survey. I mentioned before, we're getting ready for demolition. That's one of the tests that we're in the process of getting ready to set up. And what I can say there is anything we're required to do, we will do. So I agree with you. I would expect there's going to be some type of contamination there. I don't know exactly what, just based on when the buildings were built, but we're going through that process now. And as I mentioned, anything that we're required to do as per zoning or Department of Building rules will be done. So if we do find it, we have to remediate it before we can demolish it.
So the bare minimum required by law, just to be clear.
We're doing exactly what's required, yes.
Just to be clear, the bare minimum required.
Well, I'm not trying to be funny here. I'm just telling you, we're gonna do it. And I'm not trying to skirt around anything. I'm telling you, we're gonna do what's required.
It's not funny. Tony and I live next door.
No,
If
ma'am.
there's-
No,
if
ma'am.
There's
We're
asbestos,
not
that's not
talking-
funny.
Shut her off, please. David?
Yes, thank you. When this was presented to us at the education side of it, I complained that I thought that the school part was way too small. And that's when I was of the impression it was half the lot. I didn't think it was big enough for a school, and I certainly didn't think it was big enough for a schoolyard. And now it is very clear that the residence is going to take up 2/3 to 3/4, and God knows what the school and schoolyard are going to be. This project is not going to be here for 3 years. It's going to be here for 60 years, for 90 years. I think that it is important that we do continue to press our electeds and SCA to go back to the drawing board, because I think that as is, it needs to be rejected and should not get any measure of approval from this community board. The whole plot has to be looked at in context with each other. I am a product of public schools. My mother and sister both taught. I'm very excited about the prospect of another public school, but not a shoebox that the kids can't even, go out and play basketball at recess. This large lot has to be reconfigured in a realistic way. I think that the building is very large and the school is very small, and it has to be figured out the appropriate sizes for each. And it could mean eliminating one or the other. I'm not prepared to get into that, but the buildings are way disproportionate, and I think that the school will not serve our children. Thank you.
Nick?
Thank you, Mr. Rodney. Thank you again for your time. Just to be clear, did Tishman buy the property from the Archdiocese and then sell part of the lot to SCC, or was it the other way around?
Neither. We both purchased respective lots from the Archdiocese.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Camelia.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Ronnie, I think, first of all, thank you for being here and giving us as much information as you can, although I feel like many board members convey the feeling that we do feel it's quite insufficient and a little bit worrisome at times. I just want to echo what Bob and David said. To be very clear, we feel a little bit ambushed by the whole sort of confusion and overlap with the school authority and now your presentation, in the sense that that footprint of your building seems absolutely overwhelming, seems gigantic compared to the impression we have been left with after the school authority presentation. And you heard people's concern as far as open space, green space, and all that. So maybe it's a silly question, but honestly, I'm wondering, and please explain to me, is that footprint, do you consider it to be sort of decided, or is there still space maybe to be, I don't know if you're even allowed to be like higher but narrower, so that like open space be left more there to echo, Dan's concern, Robert's concern, especially as far as flooding, and like Broadway is a corridor with chronic flooding issues. I mean, we have a river running under it. So I'm just wondering, and please tell me, like, very simple, is that footprint set from your point of view, or do you feel like you would have some space to reduce it essentially? Thank you.
It's pretty close to set. We've done everything that's allowed under the zoning. Everything is as of right. We didn't want to try to go taller and be mindful of what's happening in the surrounding community. So everything is just what's allowed under the zoning rules.
Gary, let me make a suggestion, and I don't need an answer now, but I'd like you to think upon it. It is very clear to me, as I think it's been clear now to most of the people on this presentation, that what it was that was told to us by SCA is not necessarily what was going on, and that perhaps we were misled intentionally or otherwise. We're going to have to bring them in, whether they like it or not. And we're going to have to ask both the assemblyman and the council member to help us in that effort, and I'm sure they will, as will the borough president. But I would like to think about rescheduling after you've had a chance to digest all of the information that you've gotten here and got together some renderings that are a little more descriptive of where you really want to go, to rescheduling a date so we can have a further conversation, if that is in order as far as you and your colleague are concerned. That would be helpful. You're getting the overflow of the negative vibes that have come out of the SCA thing. I wasn't even aware that they had refused to attend on the 29th. That's unsatisfactory. Their presentation last time was by someone who didn't know what was going on at all and said, we'll get that presentation to you. I think they may not be properly led. Robert Press.
Thank you, Chuck. Just a couple of questions. I noticed that in other schools, having been the President's Council in District 10, that schools use parks across the street, and Van Cortlandt Park is across the street from this school. But I want to know if HPD funding will be used or will tax credits be coming from HPD for this project? That's my first question.
For the residential piece, yes.
Yes, so you know that with that funding on a building of this size that you have to have a homeless component in it, which would be approximately 66 units of homeless housing, as is done in other projects that has been done by Catholic Charities and other builders, correct?
There has to be a component, that is correct.
20%.
Excuse me?
20%, I'm told.
15%.
Okay, so 15% of this building will be homeless then.
Formerly homeless. So it's roughly about 50 apartments.
Robert,
okay. And
I point you to several super luxury buildings that you are personally familiar with that have the same percentage. I'll walk you through it some other time.
One final point. For the lottery, Housing Connect will be conducting it, correct?
Correct.
And that means that people from Brooklyn, Queens, or anywhere else can come in and not necessarily from the Bronx, correct?
Yeah, it has to be open to anybody.
Okay, thank you very much.
Karen Argenti.
Yeah, hi. I won't go into it too much, but I sent a note in and hopefully it could get passed on to you, Rodney, Gary. We are concerned about the stormwater, and we have new rules that just became effective as the beginning of this year. The unified stormwater rule and green infrastructure is absolutely required. I don't see where that's going to go or how you're going to deal with it. We're also concerned about if there's enough room for the sewage for the homes. I assume there's enough room for the schools because there was a school there, but for the new amount of people that we're talking about, we have a problem at the Broadway sewer line. It's a combined sewer, between the flooding and the sewage, there's just no room there. It's constantly flooding all over the place. And there's just a lot of water, like you've never seen. I mean, BJ's took 3-4 years. I can't even remember. They kept digging and they kept flooding and kept digging, and they redid the McDonald's and they redid Burger King because they had the flooding, and they still have the flooding, and we're still doing the daylighting project, but that's not going to be enough. Your project and the other project are both qualified to meet the green infrastructure rules. Anything over 20,000 square feet is a major project, and we are making it, the Bronx Council for Environmental Quality is going to make it a case study, since it's the first one that we know of, to watch exactly what's going to go on. So we look forward to working with you on that, but we just like to alert you to the fact that this is a brand new kind of a procedure, and it's not going to be like just okayed by the buildings department. The DEP is going to be there and watching this, and we are too. I'd also like to ask for
Karen, let me stop you a minute. It is important that Gary, your folks have the input from Karen and from Bob Vanuzzi on the environmental concerns. If Mr. Lodi or whoever you think appropriate would be able to spend a few minutes with them on the phone or otherwise, I'd like to get those two pieces together so you get all of the information, because it will impact on your construction, it will impact in every area. Kira, will you work that out for Karen and Bob Vanuzzi to pay attention.
Of course.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you. And then I'd also like to just
Gary,
see that.
Gary, hold on, Karen, I'll get back.
Okay.
Gary, would that be okay? Should it go?
Absolutely, and we're aware of the flooding concerns and we're working with DEP already, but that's not going to be an issue. I'll connect you with the right person, the right people on my side.
Very good. Go ahead, Karen.
The study of the soils, the environmental assessments, phase 1 and phase 2. We'd like to see a copy of those. I sent a note to the SCA, but I don't know if that email works. So I don't know if you guys have it. I can't tell who did that study, but we'd like to know what needs to be remediated and at what level it will be cleaned up to. Because schools, housing, people recreating, you need to have it cleaned to the highest level. And I would urge that we believe that even though there is a minimum, we think you should go for the gold, or as we say, the green, and go 2 steps higher and not just meet the basic level of any of the topics that come before you.
Karen, you'll be in touch with Kara and Kara with you.
Yes, thank you.
Whoever AM is, now's your time.
Thank you so much. The parking lot is actually on the corner of 239th Street, which is literally where the school is. So now we are talking about traffic for 336 units, all coming out where the school is supposed to be. There's a BJ's there, there's Broadway, there's the I-87. The park is there. How are you thinking that all this is gonna happen? And oh, by the way, you mentioned that there's 70 parking units and you're not gonna need any more. You think you're not gonna need any more because of the subway. However, since COVID, there's been a 15% increase in cars in New York City. So actually you're going backwards. So how is everyone going to live there and drive? I live here, so I want to know.
That's the problem we've had from the moment we asked Sylvia Alexander and others asked SCA for that information. That's what they claimed they were going to provide in the environmental impact statement. And then now we got the negative deck, which doesn't provide a damn thing. That's the problem.
So again, I can't speak to the school. The entrance for our parking space is on 239th Street.
That's where the school is.
School entrance is on Review Place, not on 239th.
I'm sorry, Gary, I don't mean to cut you off and I apologize, but tomato. So basically the school's here, the parking lot's here.
Well, yeah, I was just trying to address what you
Okay, but
asked.
yeah,
So
that's my point. It's like right there. And then, by the way, my building is here. So now we're all trying to leave during work hours because again, it's a school. So there's going to be kids there, which 50 miles an hour. Now parking lot, those people getting to work. And like we said, the probable targets are going to be civil servants. And that's probably part of your values, whatever that means. But my point is all these people have to get to work at the exact same time. How? Without everyone leaving at 5 in the morning.
How's everybody
How
doing?
is at 8 in the morning, that place is going to be a standstill. That will be Times Square. And I hope you can see that. Because I actually came in with an open mind. I was pretty quiet, but like my mind is blown. And look, the fact that the building's an eyesore, it is what it is. The 15% homeless, Chuck, I would love to be part of that. You mentioned to the person, to Robert, that you were going to explain how 15% homelessness isn't actually an issue. I would love to be part of that. I will give you my phone number.
I didn't say that it wasn't going to be.
You were going to explain it to Robert.
No.
I want to be part of that explanation because I'm not that bright.
No, I was going to show Bob Press some of the highest valued buildings in the city of New York that are also in the 15% homeless requirement in order to get that thing. It's a citywide standard, which many people have a lot of problems with, but it's there. It's manageable if it's handled properly. Remember, homeless.
Chuck.
Oh, wait.
I'm sorry. My bad.
Homeless, like the word affordable housing, is comprised, is a generic term that into which they have folded schizophrenics, drug addicts, people who are really homeless, people who don't even want to live in a house, and people who just have to be taken care of, okay? And the issue is, how do you deal with it? The whole homeless problem is a disaster. Ask Laura Spalter and the people who live up on Broadway. I mean, it's an issue that's a separate issue, but it's something that has to be dealt with. Let me move on to Mr. Puello, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, for your presentation. I just want to talk on behalf of myself and some other homeowners in the area and some other tenants. I had drafted testimony that I was planning to read to you, but I just wanted to say that I understand that the community participation, community input and participation process has been totally violated. It has been undermined. It has not been effective. Having said that, I want to refer to the School Construction Authority. I understand that recently the School Construction Authority conducted traffic analysis. And I just want to read to you, refer to an article in the Riverdale Press dated September 2nd, 2021, which stated that the School Construction Authority noted that there are potential significant traffic impact at 3 of the steady area intersections, but they said that it could be fully mitigated. That's one. And the second point that I'd like to make is the fact that I want to refer to another article in the Bronx Times, and that article is dated December 17, 2021. In that article, even our own assemblyman, Jeffrey Dinowitz, was quoted as saying that it was excessive to have that many housing units on a single site. And to conclude my my presentation, if you will, if you want to call it presentation, I'd like to add to the fact that to add that Community Board 8 member, Rosemary Ginty, who I understand is also a member of the Land Use Committee of the board, stated that the combined school and housing uses poses an important land use issues given the traffic around the site. So I'm really concerned about the, as a homeowner living on Van Cortlandt Park, I'm concerned about the quality of life. I'm concerned about the traffic congestion. And of course, I'm concerned about the property value. I invested, me and my wife, I worked all our life since I was 7 years old, and I finally have a home. And we have invested our life saving here to have tranquility and peace of mind right across the park where I saw myself and my wife just going across the park to either play golf or just to walk around the lake or to exercise or to eat at that beautiful restaurant. But now, you know what's happening now? Our tranquility and peace of mind is being threatened. Our tranquility of peace of mind is being robbed off. So we strongly oppose this proposal. And as I said before, we're rallying many other homeowners and tenants to reject this proposal. I think that we have walked throughout the entire neighborhood of Riverdale, and we have taken pictures and addresses of several sites on the other side of the on Riverdale that can be suitable for this project. We feel that we are the dumping ground of the Bronx, that Kingsbridge is the dumping site of the Bronx, that we are the Harlem of the Bronx, that we are that whatever is not wanted, whatever it's just pushed to this side of the district. And thank you for listening.
Well, it's a privilege to hear you. Thank you. And I thank you. You've given us serious input. Wells Chandler. Wells Chandler.
Hello, hi. Hi. We also live at 180 Van Cortlandt Park South, and we just have a request. Gary mentioned the security van that's been parked at the site. Our windows face the site, and the van has been on with kind of flashing lights all night. And it's been extremely disruptive and frankly dangerous for anybody who's prone to seizures. So if we could make this request to have the security van be, I don't see any reason why the lights need to be flashing throughout the entire night. And it's been extremely disruptive for the past 10 days or so, or however.
Okay, I was not aware of that. Thank you for flagging it. We'll reach out to them.
Thank you. And the other question is, again, our windows are facing the site. What considerations are you making for people who live here? And how is our light going to be blocked? What can we expect? I mean, this is we really feel blindsided by this, and we had no idea that this project was happening. So I echo what my neighbors from 180 Van Cortlandt Park have already mentioned. We need more information about all of this.
We also missed the meeting about the
more information, and we're going to get it. We're asking for additional renderings. We'll see what it looks like. Okay.
We also missed the meeting about the school, so we're wondering if how tall the proposed building is for the school.
Who's this?
The same.
The same
we're in the
people.
same.
We're two people. Sorry. Wells.
It's still Wells Chandler.
Still us.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Chandler. All right, Luis. Luis.
Hey, thank you all. So number one, I want to echo the sentiments.
I don't think their questions were answered. If we could please address those questions.
The school is 5 stories.
Thank you.
So yeah, thanks again. So again, being a fellow neighbor here at 180 Van Cortlandt, and everyone else in the neighboring blocks, right, I echo the feelings of my neighbors, right? Because we do want people to have a place to live. Right? I can say maybe some of us have been in situations where we need that. However, one thing that New Yorkers, including ourselves, need, part of that quality of life is, right, how are we handling noise pollution? Because over 300 apartments is going to get pretty noisy. How are we handling emissions with all these cars? Is there any plan to support electric vehicles, right? Electric vehicles are the future, right? We're not sticking to combustibles for too long. And what guarantees, or is there anything that can be done to make sure that other people's, whether it's their conversation or their music, is not rolling over onto our sidewalks, their trash, right? Because I think so excellently said by Mr. Puello, we work like all others very hard, and we want that quality of life. Is this structure here to take that away? Because I want to say this, I do not like to read between the lines, and I almost feel like I heard, well, the design is set in stone, and I really don't want this to be like a courtesy meeting where it's like, hey, FYI, we're gonna spend almost 2 hours now where it's just, we're gonna record this meeting and our input isn't valued. Is there a chance, a real chance, for change to be made for the benefit of the people who live here, the people who will live here? Or is this just courtesy and we have no voice? Again, I do not want to read between the lines.
Luis, I have never conducted, in the 30 years I've been chair of this committee, a courtesy meeting, and this isn't going to be the first, okay? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to ask Mr. Rodney and his colleagues to put together a more detailed rendering and plan that shows the various points that Rosemary touched upon, whether it's setbacks, whether it's curb cuts, all of the various information that is normally put together in one of these. together with some rendering so people can get a real feel for what this is all about. And then schedule a further session with you at some date that is early and convenient. Number two, and I suspect more importantly, we're going to do what we can through the assemblyman and others to make sure that the SCA starts to be responsive here in terms of telling us what's going on. Frankly, this is, as Marty pointed out, this is not the configuration, the size, or anything that we were in writing told by SCA was going to be here. It's quite different. And SCA's refusal even to show up at the meeting on the 29th, I find extremely troublesome, and indicates an arrogance in office that cannot be supported, and whoever is responsible for it ought to get fired. But that's just the way things are. So it is now 9 o'clock. There is a balance to the agenda. We will get together. I will give you a call. We'll see what we can arrange at an early date when you can pull the information together. But I have to tell you, everybody, my concern is more with SCA to find out exactly when they're going to give us their half of the component, because that's going to touch more of this. All right. Is there anything else new and different that has to be added?
Well, I do have a question that goes back to the beginning of the presentation that has not been addressed. And I actually want to thank all of the board members who have addressed environmental issues, traffic issues, et cetera, and so on. Thank you. My question is this, and this is for Gary. I would like to know how you arrive at your numbers. You're talking 336 units, 700 seats in a school, 70 parking spaces. I hear that and I say, if every person living in this building had 2 kids, that would fill the school. And we know that this neighborhood needs school seats desperately. We also know that this neighborhood has 5 new buildings of affordable housing on Broadway. We also know that this building, as many people have said here, exists on a floodplain and has tremendous environmental impact. We also know that traffic is a huge issue and parking is a huge issue. So I'm not sure, as somebody who's listening to this plan, how you arrive at the numbers of 336 units, 700 seats in a school, and 70 parking spaces. If you are truly, Mr. Rodney,
parking spaces are only for the residents, not.
It's still 336 units, 70 parking spaces. If, Mr. Rodney, you are in fact interested in serving this community, I ask you how you have come in and looked at the site and actually assessed the needs of this community, because the numbers you are giving do not seem to reflect the pressing needs of this community for seats for school children, places for people to park, right? Environmental concerns, green spaces. I think your plan, as many of the board members have already indicated, is frankly out of whack with the current infrastructure of the neighborhood and with the needs of the people who live in this neighborhood. And I am glad that this is not a courtesy meeting. And I am glad that the board members I have heard speak have expressed concerns about all the things of the residents have. And I would strongly suggest that this plan be reconsidered, because those numbers are not only wrong, those numbers are a recipe for disaster. And I don't want to have to live next to a disaster. please, please, please reconsider what you are presenting here. It is not sustainable. I live here. I've lived here for 13 years. I don't need your plans to tell me what you are suggesting is not sustainable. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And you've heard what we are next going to do. Is there any question from any member of the board? David, your hand's up.
Yes, I just want to make clarification. SCA's presentation to us said the school building would be 73 feet tall, which suggests 7 or 8 stories tall. Just to clarify something from earlier. Question.
Okay.
All right.
Just a point of information, Laura, do we have a location for our September 29 meeting?
Not yet. We're
the
waiting to
residents
find
are on?
out. We're waiting to find out if the governor extends the emergency so that it can be on Zoom.
Can you just tell the folks how they could find out that information? Maybe give them some board info?
Sure. We'll have it on our website, and we'll certainly get flyers out and post it all around the neighborhood like this meeting was and like previous meetings were. And if you call the board office, you can always get information from us.
That phone number, please?
884-3959.
And I'd be curious because I did not get an answer from Mr. Rodney to my question about how he arrived at his numbers. I would actually like that answer.
Thank you, ma'am. You may have it at the next meeting.
Another comment that I'd like to make before we depart is that this was advertised in Spanish. And as a member of the community, a native Spanish speaker, I would want to make sure that we're taking into account those individuals who speak Spanish in these meetings moving forward.
Let me see. What is it you're seeking?
Accessibility. So hello, this is Miss DT. So making sure that if we're really all about the entire community, we live in Amalgamated, shout out to all our Amalgamated neighbors, that we're making sure that people who speak Spanish and that speak the multiple languages that make up Kingsbridge can actually have access to this. And so I totally get the flyers are cool, and putting it on the website is great, but making sure that if you are inviting people to a meeting, that you are opening up accessibility options for people to fully participate. And then the last, this is also.
Wait. If you are suggesting that we have some form of translation here, we don't have the resources.
Well, then if you're advertising in Spanish, if you are saying that you open this in Spanish or that this is available in other languages, you have to provide these tools in order to do that.
We do not have the resources.
Then you have to say that on the flyer. Hey, come in Spanish, but like we can't offer you translation or like offer captions or something.
You've heard me. We do not have the resources to provide translation. I'm sorry.
Equitable. That's not equitable.
I agree with you. Then what I would suggest is you ask the mayor to finally do the right thing, not have agencies of the city of New York consistently ignore this board and every other community board, to go ahead as DOT has done, DOT, and destroy city streets solely for the purpose of enlarging its own interests. Ma'am, this board does not have a budget that allows for simultaneous translation. I wish we did. And it would not only be Spanish, there would be other languages that have to be dealt with too. And I wish we could do it.
Mr. Murdler, I had a question about AMI. I thought it'd be
Ma'am, please.
So we started this presentation, Mr. Rodney started the presentation with a discussion of AMI and the intricacies. And I noticed that there was one slide on the deck that I'd like to discuss because it referenced AMI, but I'm afraid I didn't understand what exact income it corresponded to. So let me just repeat what I took notes on. 60% of the units would be affordable to households earning between 40 and 80%. Could you please remind me what 40 to 80, what income bands that encompass?
40% is roughly about apologize, I'm just trying to pull up my notes. I think it's roughly about 48,000. That's for a family of 3.
So if 40 is about 48, then what would 80% be?
80 for a family of 3 gets you roughly about 96,000.
96. Okay,
And
so
I will say 2 things. 1, those are in today's dollars. Right, so, and 2, that's for a family of 3, these numbers that I'm giving you. That number fluctuates slightly if your family, as your family size adjusts. So I just want to make sure we're all kind of on the same page about what I'm just using that as a proxy for now.
I understand. Thank you for clarifying. And it's been a long night, so I understand that you want to be careful with what you say. So if that's 60%, those units are affordable to those income bands, that would be equal to about 202 units, based on the fact that this project would be 336. So the next 40% of units, that would correspond with bands 80% to 110. So if we have roughly 96 for a family of 3 for 80, then what would be the rough income band for 110 AMI?
130.
100. Okay.
I'm probably slightly off. It's like 132 something, but that approximately 130,000.
Got it. So if we jump to the units that are available, I see that we have studios that make up a quarter of the total units. So that would be about 84 total studios, and studios, based on other guidelines that I've seen from AMI postings, they only house 1 person. Is that correct?
Officially, it can be 2, but it's 1 to 2 people.
1 or 2 people. So for 1 bedrooms, I saw on the slide that 45% of the units will be 1 bedrooms. And that would correspond to about 151 1-bedroom apartments, correct? In that ballpark?
That could be right, but I just wouldn't want to double check, but it's probably in that vicinity.
So in the case of a 1-bedroom, 1 or 2 people would be the allowable inhabitants of 1 bedroom. Is that correct?
Officially, if they have a child, it can be up to 3 people, I believe is the rule.
Up to 3.
I think that's the rule, when it's 1.
Got it. So the remaining percentages, not to take too much of people's times, the remaining percentages for 2 bedrooms, it'd be 20% of the total units. So that would amount to about 67 2-bedroom apartments. And 2-bedroom apartments, based on our discussion, would allow 4, maybe 5 people if there's a child involved. Up to 4 or 5. And then finally, 3 bedrooms is 10% of the units, which is 34 total units. And that could house as many as 7 people in a 3-bedroom unit.
On average, probably that's about right. It goes to it. It kind of goes depending on number of children you have and who's splitting rooms, but that's probably a fair assumption.
Okay, so based on this division, the total amount of units that would be made available to people in households of 3 or fewer would be about 120, about 130, let's say.
You said 3 or fewer?
3 or fewer, so studios and 1-bedrooms.
I feel like it should be a larger number because I think the 2 is.
Well, it could also be 2 bedrooms, just to throw that in. It could be a couple with a child in the other bedroom.
Yeah, so I guess where are you trying to get to? And maybe that is an easier way instead of trying to split hairs with the.
Well, I'm trying to understand like the distribution of affordable housing units as a number of total units and as a number of total people that could be serviced by them, as opposed to just looking at income bands and what amounts of money people have to qualify to make, and focus more on like how many affordable housing units would this introduce into our community that are actually affordable, and who are the people that would live in them. So in your example, you provided 1 MTA worker and a teacher, possibly with 1 child. And I guess I'm trying to see if that would actually be the case where families are living in these apartment buildings as opposed to college students or people living by themselves, and what character that would bring to the neighborhood, as opposed to advertising that this would be for families, but then it turns out it's just a bunch of single occupancy housing.
it won't be just, well, it may be individual residents, but they're all gonna have 12-month leases at a minimum. So everybody here, it's not gonna be any short stays or people coming in for like 6 months or a short period of time. Everybody has a 12-month lease. Everybody is gonna kind of be living in the actual building as opposed to just having a place. So first and foremost, every single unit's gonna be income restricted, as I mentioned. So regardless of what income range you're falling into, all apartments at this project are income restricted. And so depending on how you want to count how many people are in each unit, you can kind of try to back into a general number of total population. But in terms of what we're providing housing for people who are going to be residents, or maybe in some cases, they may be existing residents, but actual residents of this community and staying and living here as opposed. And again, these are going to be people who, some may be formerly homeless, but these are going to be actual residents who are working and have some sort of income that they're looking to do. They just need to, they can't afford to pay as much as everybody else, so they're paying us at different income levels.
Is there any possibility of a rent to own arrangement or a cooperative structure so that the folks who are living in these apartment buildings or in these units are living there for more than just a 12-year or year-by-year period?
Not with the structure that we've set up. The affordable housing financing that we're looking to seek from the government sources would not, are not set up to do that.
In other projects that you might be
Chuck,
working on?
may I raise a point of order?
Oh,
I'm looking at the agenda. We have 4 other sites that we are supposed to be discussing tonight. I appreciate the importance of this particular issue. We are going to come back to it again. Questions can be directed to the board office that I'm sure Mr. Rodney will be happy to address. But please, let's consider where we are on the agenda.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. We will now move on to the next item on the agenda, if I may. Gary, many, many thanks, and I'll be in touch to get the information pulled together to respond to the various questions that have been put this evening.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, everyone, for the time.
Thank you, Gary, for your time.
All right, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
Marty Wolpoff, the update on the working group 3745 Riverdale Avenue. Are you there, Marty?
Yeah, I will attempt to be as brief as possible, given the time. Just note, if you drive by the site now, I think we're all pleased to see that the building is going up. We're no longer talking about an open piece of ground. We're now talking about a building. They're working from Riverdale Avenue. They will complete, when they complete the second floor, they'll begin working from Oxford Avenue and do the further construction will come off of that street. We have not had a meeting over the summer, but we've been in constant conversation. They have provided us with a Gantt chart, which indicates a breakdown from month to month of where they see the construction progressing, and we're pleased to see that. They have been requested by the residents of the next door building, 3751, that the windows on the floors that face the construction that will be totally useless as a result of having facing a building. STAG will be closing those windows up, so they will not be useful, but there will also not be a problem for the residents. Again, at the request of the people who already live there. I have other things, but I want to keep going. Foundation pouring of the last section of the slab it was scheduled for last week. When I drove by, I didn't have a chance to look at if that has taken place. They anticipate pouring the fourth floor concrete slab was estimated to have been today. It was raining. I didn't see much activity going on. I drove by. And finally, had a date here. I cannot find it. There is based on the Gantt, there is a proposed 2023 completion date. And I'd like to be more specific, but I can't find it at the moment. And so, as I say, things are moving forward, and I hope to have a meeting with them. The working group will meet with them as early as next week, as was promised to me by Jay. So let's hope that takes place. So unless there are questions, I just want you to move your agenda.
Okay. Any questions on yesterday, Vintage?
Yes, Marty, I don't believe we've met with Jay in 4 to 6 weeks. How many times have you requested that we have that he schedule a follow-up meeting with us?
I've requested it several times. But he has promised to set up a meeting either next week or the week after. So we have been in communication. So I'm not happy that we haven't met, but I am pleased that we're going to have a date shortly.
If you don't let me know, you will. All right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Marty.
All right. Item number 5, 3991 Saxon Avenue. That matter is off the calendar because the developer has pulled the plans and is not doing anything at the moment. It is an issue that happened the moment he got a letter from us asking we want to know more about it. So we'll see if that comes alive again. They have nothing happening in the Department of Buildings. There are 3 items that have a relationship. They are 215 West Kingsbridge Road, 229 Kingsbridge Road, and 235 Kingsbridge Road. Let me just find my notes on this. They have a common owner, and that common owner has indicated, here we go. That common owner has indicated the following, that he would be here or try to be here tonight. I believe his name is Jurek. Are you here, sir?
It's Paul Durkaj.
Yep.
I do see a Paul in attendance. I don't know if it's him.
Mr. Durkaj, are you here? Going once, going twice. All right. This is a problem. Mr. Durkaj is both a realtor in the area and a landlord. We have a problem on these sites as follows. Let me just pull up my notes. On 215 West Kingsbridge Road, the zoning is an R6. The prior building has been demolished. A violation on the site exists for failure to certify. The landlord had not heard back until earlier today, saying he would be at the meeting to report on what he has in mind for this site. If he isn't here, what I will do is ask buildings not to entertain or deal with any application of his until he does show what he's going to do. Why? 235 West Kingsbridge Road has been a continuing problem for some time. DOB has been asked to come in. FDNY has been asked to come in. A series of quality of life complaints have been coming from this building as a steady stream. This is a problem, and this is why there's the concern. The third building, again on R6, the pavement operation disapproved the application for the pavement. And on 322, the building department asked to see him. Same landlord. This has all the earmarks of a problem. And the problem is complicated, I think, for the owner because he has a real estate realtor's license on the line with it as well. So we're going to ask him one more time before we focus in on this in not too cordial a manner. So that's all I can tell you about it. But the one area where we have activity has been on 229 West Kingsbridge, which is a series, a seemingly endless series of quality of life complaints that Kira has been trying to deal with for many months now.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Durick, are you here?
Yes.
Well, now let's start. I'm glad you're here. Let me pull you up on my screen so we can chat. I'd like to know why we are getting this steady stream of quality of life complaints here.
In Kingsbridge?
Yep.
I don't know. That's the complaint. I just start working there. Actually, I get some complaints, and for the building, it's been there for 3 years now. I have the management company. They run in the building. They put some. I see it was the problem because they put some veterans, some I don't know, Section 8 programs. I'm not sure what programs, but also. It's most of those people, it's wheelchair people.
Well, let me put it to you this way. I don't want to see any more of those complaints.
I promise you, because I'm going to start working there. I'm going to put more people there. Working, and it's going to be.
Are you the owner of the building?
Yes.
All right. So let me put it to you this way. As best I can, I don't want to see any more of these complaints. They have been perhaps as many complaints there in the past couple of months as any other place in the entire community board district.
I'm going to try to resolve all those problems. I'm going to hire more people to serve in this building, and I'm going to try to. A lot of people actually, those tenants, some of those, they expired the lease, and I'm going to try not to renew the lease.
All right, so here's what I'd like you to do, if you don't mind.
Yes.
I'd like you to be in touch with Kira Gannon, who is the district manager.
Yes.
And put together a program of how you're going to deal with these complaints. And if you could get that to her by Monday, that would be a good thing. And then
okay.
Then next month, I'd like you to be here and give us a full report on what's happened and what is going to happen, all right?
Yes, sure.
All right. Number 2, the pavement plan you put in was disapproved, and DOB has asked for an appointment on that. Now, where are you with them on 229?
The architect is trying to get approval. It's going to be standard draw the plans, and it's not nothing special. We're not asking for anything like the standard building.
Let me explain. It's all the pavement plan has already been disapproved. You're going to have to put in a new plan and meet the objections. Get hold of the architect and have him put in something that's proper.
Yeah, of course, yes. That's in process that to resolve those objections.
Who is the architect?
It's they called Jacobs. It's his office is in Manhattan.
All right. When can you get back to us with a report on what you're doing on 229 West Kingsbridge?
Soon as I got approval, actually, because they doing the.
It's not a matter of getting approval. We're not going to ask the building department to expedite this unless and until we see there's a plan for the building. Buildings has been trying to see you on getting this building straightened out.
Oh, okay, I can send you the plans, whatever it's doing the drawing. It's residential, it's 37 units, and it's like I said, standards new construction. It's nothing, it's not going to be affordable. It's not like, it's going to be like, I think maybe, I don't know if it's gonna be qualified for tax abatement. It's gonna be like free market or whatever.
Do you know what you're going to be doing with it? Is it going to be regular housing, market rate housing, affordable housing? Do you have any plans for it?
A regular market rented.
I think maybe we ought to have a conversation, because I think what you need to do is to get your architect and you together and tell us and tell yourself what you want to do with this thing. Or we get problems with it.
That's, I'm gonna try not to have a problem for anybody.
Okay.
That's it's my concern too. I'm the side jobs every day.
All right.
From
So third
7.
building, you've got a violation on the building now for an extended period of time.
That I bought it with that violation, actually. When I bought the property, I bought it like that. And it was an auction, actually. And they supposed to take care of those people when I bought from the auction.
Did you buy it?
I bought it from auction.
When?
3 years ago, I think.
3 years this violation's been on there?
Yeah, because nobody pays that. Actually, the lawyers list.
You own the building, you own the site. You're the person who's responsible for taking care of it.
Yes, yes, but when I did closing, we left the money in escrow. The people they supposed to take care of that, they never take care. That's why. And I'm gonna ask now because I need to release that that violation.
All right, so let's do the following. If you will do this, we will try and work with you to get all this stuff done. It is today the 6th. Can you, by the 20th, 2 weeks from now, give us a report on where you are on all 3 buildings?
Yeah, sure.
Do you have an attorney?
Yes, I have an attorney.
Would you ask that attorney to contact me? He can get me through the board office.
Okay.
I'd like to talk to him. This looks like a problem to me. All 3 sites are they all one next to one another, or are they?
Yes.
And what are you planning? 1 building for all 3 or 3 separate buildings?
No, I'm planning to build 137 units. It's in 229. The other one is 23 units. And the existing one is 40.
All right. Please, you are now the subject of people looking at it. So please get it on 20th, all right?
Yeah, but I promise you, it's gonna be good tenants, and I'm gonna select this time when I put those buildings. It's gonna be the projects they're gonna be select the tenants, not to destroy it, but I'm trying to improve that neighborhood.
I do appreciate that, and I think that's a commendable approach. 20th for a report on where you are, and we will see you on October the 3rd at the next meeting of this committee, all right?
All right.
Please put it on your calendar, both those. All right?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Kira, please follow up on that, huh?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Are there outstanding minutes to be acted on? I see it's next item's approval of the minutes. Kira, are there any outstanding minutes to be acted on?
Let's hold them over until October 3rd.
Okay. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Is there anything anyone on the board or on the committee has as an issue? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor, contrary minded. Thank you. That's done. I wish you all well. Take care.
Good night.